Hi, my name is Pastor Jim Hoggett. We're at Coeur d'Alene Open Bible Church in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I'm sitting here in my office with a couple from the New Testament. This is Priscilla and this is Aquila. They've been referred to my office by the Apostle Paul. You know, the guy that wrote most of the New Testament. We've been talking about relationships and how to make relationships work in families. And we've been talking about something called family systems. One of the things we want to deal with today is the word denial. Denial is a very common thing among the world. James Dobson says, most of us live in denial most of the time. He said that one of the things we live in denial with is the idea that someday we're going to die. He said it's virtually impossible for a 32-year-old male to go to a funeral, see a body in a casket, and psychologically put himself in that casket. It's never going to happen to him. In fact, you watch teenagers. Teenagers have the idea that they are bulletproof. Well, we want to talk about denial. If I'm driving my car down the street and I get in an accident, so I do something like break my arm, well, my body goes into shock if it's just too much pressure for me. And people walk around with a broken arm and don't know it because they've gone into shock. Well, we do the same thing psychologically. We get a psychological bruise. And it's just like too much pressure for us to deal with that. So we take that hurt, that injury, and we bury it. Bury it down deep, down below the unconscious line, or some people say subconscious, way down deep inside of us. And then we pretend everything's fine and there's no problem here. We cover it with calluses and just hold it down, and sometimes do that for hours or sometimes weeks or sometimes years. People have buried this thing. The problem with it is that as time goes along, those calluses get thinner and thinner. And this thing begins to show its head. And when it shows its head, it'll always show its head in a different area than when it went down. Now it's very important because they forced it down over here, and then as time goes along, it begins to show its head and it pops up over here. And the person says, something's wrong, I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but something is wrong. Maybe it's my body. So they go to the doctor, and the doctor gives a full physical and says, no, nothing wrong with your body, okay? Well, maybe it's the job, or my husband, or maybe it's the church, or maybe it's my children. Something's wrong. You can't put your finger on it. The problem is they're dealing with a free-floating fear or a free-floating anxiety or something that they've denied themselves years and years and years ago, and now it's beginning to show its face, and they need to do the work to work through it. If you remember the 5 steps of grieving, the first one is denial. In Vietnam, we noticed that there was a thing that happened with the soldiers who came back. Some of them had experienced horrific things in Vietnam. And they came back just thinking everything was fine. And it begins to show its head someplace else and pop up, and they gave it a name: post-traumatic stress. My brother describes a situation where you have a man, he's on the deck of a boat in World War II, and he's got a machine gun, and here comes this enemy combatant flying directly towards the ship, and so he's shooting at it, and he looks over, and his best friend, his gunner's mate, has just been blown apart by one of the missiles from this ship. So he is so upset and so distraught by losing his best friend. He should have 6 months or a year or maybe 2 years to work through the trauma of that. Instead, his commander says, we're at war, you don't have time for that, you're going to be back on that deck tomorrow, here's a new gunner's mate for you. Now these people then ended up coming home to a ticker tape parade, and they were heroes, and they were expected to get married, have kids, and have jobs, and they never gave them time to debrief. They never gave them time to work through some of the trauma of what they went through. And that was the generation that raised you and me. Okay, denial. We'll talk more next week. Thank you. Okay.